while I was in the office. So anyway, that was during the day. It was really coming down then. It's so bad. So bad. Oh my gosh, I loved it. It's just amazing. It was great. I love how generational it was. It's really amazing to see, and this is so good. Yeah, they're so grateful. It's really, really incredible.
Well, good evening. This is a Greenbelt City Council work session. My name is Emmett Jordan. I serve as mayor. Council members?
Kristen Weaver, Mayor Pro Tem.
Silky Pope, Council.
Danielle McKinney, council member. Jenny Pompey, council member.
Amy Niesel, Council Member.
Rodney Roberts, City Council.
Okay. Hey, I hear a little bit of an echo, so one of the participants that's sitting here, you've got your phone on or... Oh, there you go. Okay. Ha. Council, any information items? I have one. No information items?
Not today.
Okay. Well, we hold these council work sessions on Mondays and Wednesdays several times a month to exchange information with community stakeholder groups or to gather information from staff, advisory boards, or residents. No formal votes or actions are taken at work sessions. Our work sessions and meetings are open to the public except for executive sessions as authorized by state law so that residents and others can observe council's deliberations. We do strive to provide reasonable opportunities for the public to voice opinions on matters being considered, and we'll pause periodically for public comment. During these times, if you wish to make a comment, If you're in the room, just raise your hand. After being recognized, you can go over to the podium. You need to state your name, and if you could say where you live more or less in Greenbelt, that helps us with the minutes. If you are on Zoom, you can raise your virtual hand, and after being promoted, same things, your name and where you live in Greenbelt or in the area more or less. We don't accept anonymous comments. And if you, or you can submit a written question in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And if you're watching on Facebook, cable TV, or YouTube, you can send us an email at questions@greenbeltmd.gov. With the public comment, please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. And speak on one topic related to the question under consideration, and we ask that you avoid questioning the motives of others. And in general, let's all be civil in our remarks. So we've got a very interesting jam-packed work session tonight, and we're actually covering 2 topics. First, we're going to talk about economic development, about business retention, and growth of the local economy. These are some really, really difficult times that we're living through right now. So this strategic plan that we've been working on, that our contractors, Wilden Financial, has been working on for the past few months, is going to be really timely. So we're going to get a overview and a presentation on that. And later in the evening, probably about 8:15, 8:30, we're going to pivot over. We'll be discussing refuse and recycling service fees and services, and a pay-as-you-throw proposal. So that's what the bags are about in the middle of the room. So let's dive right in. And first, I'd like to say hello to City Manager Josue Samaron. Mr. Samaron, how are you?
I'm well. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, residents. And welcome, Molly and Rick. A little background on this, Mr. Mayor. When I joined the team, Council had very generously set aside some COVID recovery money for businesses. Part of the strategy was a marketing campaign for business. And we went out to market and we spoke with marketing firms, the Washington Business Journal and a few others on how we can best utilize these marketing dollars Council had set aside. And one of the questions that we were asked was, well, what do you want to accomplish? What's your strategy? What are we selling? And so this idea of having a strategic economic development plan and marketing plan came about, engaging with the Washington Business Journals and others that were very eager to take our money and market Greenbelt, but they wanted to align their work with our strategy. And so we went back to the drawing board and put up a drafted RFP to get professionals in the field on how we could identify what our assets are, what our economic development strategies would be, and present that to Council to adopt that so that then we can go back out and promote Greenbelt and all of our wonderful business. So that was the impetus for this work, and we're here. This is the second checkpoint with Council. Just as a reminder, we previously talked about what direction this project was taking, and this is our second out of potentially 4 checkpoints to present to Council on the work that has been done, which direction we're headed in. So we're really excited to present this work to you. I would like to thank Assistant City Manager Tim George, who's been spearheading the effort on our side and working with the Wildan Group, Molly and Rick, who've put together a wonderful project for us. Tim, you want to add anything?
No, just kick it off. I think Josue said it perfectly. What we're going to get tonight is a summary of the economic base analysis, and they've done a tremendous amount of research and data gathering and analysis. So it's going to be an economic base, peer review. They interviewed a lot of our businesses. There's a lot of great data, and it's going to take us all the way up to the point where we're going to start looking at recommendations, although tonight we won't be presenting them. This really just gets us all the way up to that point to give us an opportunity to get feedback from the residents and from Council on the data and all the analysis to date. Once we get that feedback, then we'll sit back down with the team and start developing those recommendations that will get us that 5-year path. And one thing, just to double down on what Josue had said, one of the big things that we're doing here is we're going to have strategies specifically for our businesses to continue their recovery from COVID. A lot of folks will say, well, it was so long ago, everyone's already recovered. But that's not really the case. There are a lot of businesses that are still struggling to find their market share again, to kind of reinvent themselves with the new paradigm, and that's a big part of this. Makes this economic development strategic plan a little bit unique from most, because part of it is going to be targeted specifically for Greenbelt businesses in the recovery, And then the other part of it is going to be targeted for John and Josue and myself in terms of guiding economic development over the next 5 years. And with that, we can go ahead and get started.
Right in. I do want to acknowledge our economic development staff, John Mason and Shihan, who are here. They've been working hand in hand with Mr. George and with us all to kind of move this forward. So, Rick and Molly, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. Wow, okay. I'll get that regulated. Well, good evening. We're really excited to be here. Again, I'm Molly McKay. I'm the managing principal of Willdan's Real Estate and Economic Development practice out of Washington, D.C., and I'm joined here this evening by my colleague Rick Emirato from Civic Consulting Group, and joining remotely from Idaho is Olivia Metz of the Metz Group, and we're, again, really excited to be here this evening. And as Mayor Jordan also expressed, we wanted to thank the council and, of course, Josue and Tim and John, and in fact, all of the city staff who have provided a tremendous amount of input and guidance as we went through this process. And this has been so important because we want to make sure that at the end of this, that you don't end up with just a list of lists, but in fact, some very important, more than just data, but data and strategy that it will be implementable and really help to guide the city through the future, especially in light of our very challenging economic conditions today. So with that, I think we're going to dive in. Tim has the PowerPoint that we have prepared. I ought to mention that behind this 22 slide PowerPoint, there is about a 90-page report with so much data and even more data beyond that. So if you have any questions, I'm sure there are some items that we can dive further into or tease out. We just are here tonight to present what we think are the overarching findings that we believe are going to inform those economic development policies and programs and initiatives that will land in the implementation and funding plan, which we'll talk a little bit about that later on this evening.
So about 20-25 minutes or so, and then we'll
Understood.
take some questions from council and the public. And obviously, this document, you've been working on it for about 5-6 months. So a lot of this, the things that have happened are pre-Doge and pre the executive orders and pre the past 100 days. So that shines a slightly new shade on a lot of the things that we're trying to do, but it makes these efforts all the more important. So please go ahead.
Thank you for that comment, because in fact we did take some more time after the events of January and February to dig into the data that Olivia will be presenting in terms of what your job loss risks are, and then strategies around diversifying your economy. So that is very true that we find ourselves in different times than when we started this process in October. In any case, if you could move on to the overview slide. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the economic development policy linkages that are the sort of the underpinnings of all the research, and then really where we decided to focus our time. And Olivia will be presenting that economic base assessment, getting into businesses and jobs, commuting flows, and really why that matters, your workforce availability, and target industry health check, along with some real estate market conditions assessment. We've also undertaken a peer cities comparison analysis of Greenbelt, looking at your performance or your economic conditions in comparison to your peer cities surrounding you: Laurel, Hyattsville, New Carrollton, College Park. are going to spend, I'd say, about a third of our time talking about the business climate feedback. We think that's very important because that's really the first time that you've engaged your business community, in depth, and then move into the preliminary findings and some recommendations to get your feedback. So as I mentioned, this body of work, it doesn't come out of nowhere. I mean, at first, we start with the state of Maryland, where I must say that John Mason has really been so, transformative, I would say, in terms of bringing in resources from the state and from Prince George's County to be integrated into this planning effort. And of course, we have the City of Greenbelt Council's foundational pillars, which have already been established. And then finally, a very specific pillar where we focused on was in collaboration, innovation, and smart economic development. So you'll see that the recommendations tie back to all of these policy initiatives that have already been established. So at this point, I'm going to hand the presentation over to Olivia Metz, who's going to walk you through our findings related to your economic base and opportunities, assets, and gaps and challenges related there.
Hello, everybody. My name is Olivia Metz with the Metz Group. I've been working with Molly and Rick on this project. My apologies for no camera. My bandwidth is not that strong. So I figured it would be more beneficial if I did not have my camera on, so I would not be crackling in and out. So with that said, I just wanted to go over some of the economic base analysis, like what Molly had mentioned. As you know, Greenbelt's very unique in a lot of ways. In one way, it's a very more service-based economy. 30% of jobs in Greenbelt are professional, scientific, and technical. Obviously, NASA has a lot to do with that. This is typically about fifth or sixth in ranking down the list in a typical economy. So very heavy in centric and service-based industries, which is not a bad thing. It's just what it is, and it really has a great foundation for some of the target industries that we're going to go over as well. So next slide, please. So it's very important to understand where your residents work and who is coming in and vice versa. So in the report, it is more detailed, but I think the highlight here is to show that 96% of jobs that are filled by outside residents. And so you have a lot of commuters commuting in and a lot of residents leaving the area for work. And this is just more of a mismatch of types of occupations that are in and occupate or jobs that are in Greenbelt compared to what skills sets your residents have. Again, there's opportunity with this, with aligning those two a little bit more closely, and that's from the workforce perspective. And then next slide, please. So in the report, we dive into what types of jobs are people commuting in for and what types of jobs do your residents have. And so that supply gap analysis is provided. A lot of majority of the people commuting in for work are in professional scientific. Again, NASA is a huge part of that, as you would suspect, followed by management of companies is probably like Bozzuto and some of those sorts. And then finance and insurance, retail, trade, and healthcare. And then the residents are what types of jobs that the residents really have are on the right-hand side. So a lot of people in public administration, transportation, warehousing, other services, admin and support type services, construction, and the like. So as you could see, there's a little bit of a gap there. But again, we'll kind of dive into why that's really important later on. So here is a visual of really what the gap between, and this is by zip code level, so that's why it's a little bit concentrated on the left-hand side there to the west. So a positive number is indicated in blue. It describes commuters entering a region, while a negative number is represented in red and describes commuters leaving a region. So 14% of Greenbelt residents are remote workers, and which is again a pretty high percentage. And so again, trying to capitalize on those opportunities is really there's some great opportunities for that. And then which is higher than the county. So, and then with that, we're going to dive into the target industry health check. So basically what I do is I analyze what opportunities, so the data will show, okay, we want to know the positive growth, negative growth with jobs, but how concentrated, how unique are those jobs in the area compared to other areas? What opportunities would allow for that, for those types of industries to be more beneficial for the area? So I'm not going to go through these in detail. The next slide is actually probably the highlights of what we want to focus on based on the real estate inventory, workforce, and what we're seeing in the area, as well as the initial analysis. So if you go to the next slide, we can kind of summarize those. So right here, this really sums it up. This is the crux of everything. In terms of healthcare is the backbone in terms of what are some strong emerging industries. And then you have, what I see in the data is an ecosystem that is really set in place. You do have a medical mile kind of forming here, and the ecosystem is in place for potential for bioscience, with all of the workforce that is there, the talent that you can have. There's some great opportunities with the surrounding communities to collaborate with University of Maryland, but also NASA. So all of the target industries that were identified really are built upon a great ecosystem that's all very synergistic. And so the Greenbelt is really well suited for some early stage R&D, some space life science and small scale bioprocessing, because that requires kind of smaller spaces, and Greenbelt has that. Companies whose business model depends on proximity to FDA, NASA, University of Maryland, and and Greenbelt really has that lower cost flex space that will really find real advantages here. And so, so this was actually pretty exciting for, I think, our team to kind of see that the medical mile really does shape up a broader ecosystem that could be a great potential to really expand upon. So with that being said, I'm going to pause there. I don't know if we want to do Q&A after the fact, Molly. I wasn't sure on that, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
No, I think we should kind of continue to kind of roll through, unless a council member has a burning question. Let's keep going. We've got a lot to cover.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Great. Okay, so the next topical area is the real estate market assessment, where we analyze development patterns in West, Center, and East Greenbelt. And at this point, I think at the risk of just telling you what you already know, and that is that what we found is that growth is uneven. So you have some areas that are moving forward, like Beltway Plaza with investment and revitalization, and others that are underutilized, or even where development is just not keeping up, keeping pace with your peers. And we're going to talk more about what to do with each of these areas. In the next slide, where that really, I think, is highlighted is with our analysis of housing development patterns by the year built and by housing type. And this is where you can really see a differential in, if you look at the largest share of your housing stock when it was built in comparison to those other peer cities. You have not been adding new housing stock at the same pace as your neighbors, and that does impact your ability to attract private sector businesses. Yes?
Well, there is a reason for that because we don't have the space that they have. So I think some of this, trying to compare us to other cities really is not appropriate at all because Greenbelt was supposed to be a different kind of place. Maybe not so much development or maybe more residential or whatever it is, So some of these comparisons in this one particularly, I don't think really fits Greenbelt.
So I understand.
Landlocked.
Oh, yeah. Pardon?
We are certainly more or less landlocked. There's not a lot
Yes.
of space.
So I entirely understand your perspective on that. And in this comparison, I was not meaning to compare the total number of units, jurisdiction by jurisdiction. It's more like the pace of just adding new housing stock. So that's to say, if do you believe that you've reached a point where not more, one more unit beyond the units that have already been approved would ever need to be built? And I think that there are a lot of different ways of approaching that through managed growth and looking at, for example, your commercial corridors, where it could be an appropriate place for some, incremental density.
Ms. Pope?
So, yeah, I feel like we did add some new housing stock. Motiva is new.
Yes,
yeah?
of course.
Beltway Plaza is in the process of building homes. Greenbelt Station is only, how old?
10 years old.
10 years old, very new. And the new 50-plus condominiums that are coming on Greenbelt Road. But we are landlocked. I mean, there's only so much space that we have, and we also don't own all that space. So
Yes.
it also is dependent on the owners and developers coming and offering some type of product to us. But I mean, Greenbelt is we have 24,000 people living, and we're really landlocked on all sides. So it's difficult. But I feel like I think we added quite a bit over the past 10 years and continue.
So yes, I do acknowledge that there has been some development and that there are 2,500 units planned or approved. So this analysis is more based on development patterns as a whole. And if you look at where Beltway Plaza is today in comparison to your peers, it's still, the construction is lagging just because of where it hit with COVID and interest rates. So there are so many different factors that are kind of feeding into where you are today. And if you could, maybe spend some time with the full report, you can see some of the profiles that we wrote on your neighboring jurisdictions and some of the approaches that they took to, I'd say, facilitate that kind of housing development. That's really what we're trying to get at.
Right, but the comparison to College Park, I think, is a little bit drastic because College Park operates on a total different level as we are, because a lot of their new development is co-sponsored by the University of Maryland.
Yeah, that's true. So we're certainly landlocked for new development. The only opportunities are really around redevelopment. I want to try and move. We've got so much. There is so much to talk about and think about. We're definitely going to have to come back with a more in-depth work session, perhaps in June, when we can digest this a little bit more. So please, if you can kind of continue on.
Sure. We're now going to turn the topic to the business climate feedback, and I'm going to hand it over to Rick.
Good evening. Good evening. Okay. It does take a second to get used to it. Yeah. My name is Rick Amarato. I work with a Civic Consulting Group, and I've had the pleasure over the last few months to meet with a lot of your business community, with Molly and with staff at some times. So it's been a real opportunity to kind of understand the sentiment that you get from your business community. I would like to offer a caveat here that there is definitely blurred lines between the role of the county and the role of the city. So sometimes it's a little bit hard to define. When you see some of the feedback in this, keep that in mind. You know, there's a lot of functions that you do not provide for these customers that may shade their perception of what's going on. Again, I would like to start with some of the strengths that we saw, and I tried to coalesce this into groups so you can kind of understand the general feedback, and then we'll get into some of the more specific. But it comes up in almost every conversation, the strength of this community, the quality of life, the amenities, the livability that really attract people to live here. You know that better than I do about why people want to be here and why Greenbelt's so special. But in almost every conversation from all walks of the business community, that's something that we have seen. It'd be the next slide. These are just the questions sort of that we had asked. It's a strategic location with a lot of assets. You have engaged officials, just like we see this evening, and a professional city staff. There's a lot of economic potential. You have great historic and cultural values that guide this city. And you have superior parks and recreation amenities. And I don't think any of you would be surprised to hear that that's what the people say. I'm sure you hear that every day. Now I get into the part where we talk about some of the weaknesses and some of the threats and some of the feedback, which is when I was a child was called criticism at the time, but they've changed the. It's okay, right? Criticism.
It still comes out to the same.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
And
I definitely want to say this. In 25 years, 4 different states, a bunch of different communities. I've never been in a community where the business people came up and said, "Oh, this place is just amazing." I mean, they're just helping us print money. There's always a sense that there's a negative business climate, that there could always be more being done. So take that when you hear this. But again, negative perceptions of the business climate, that it can be hard, and that's not necessarily the city's fault. It's just times are hard. There's inflation. They've just gone through COVID. There's been sea changes throughout the economy. So, but people are feeling that, right? Things are getting more difficult, not easier. There's a lengthy development process here with the county. There is a sentiment that came up that the city and the community can be change resistant. And I think that's embedded in your historical and cultural values, right? Greenbelt is a special place. And so you want to stay true to that. And we understand that, but people do see that sometimes as being resistant to change. Lack of incentives, again, I think that really falls a little bit more on the county. And the retail is vulnerable. We've all seen that in the past half decade, and it's that vulnerability is not going away. So there's still people who are struggling every day. On the threats, again, a stagnant tax base you're going through, or you have gone through your budget process for the coming year. I think you understand that to offer the level of services, the high level of services that you do, you need to have a growing tax base. So that can be a problem for the city. Something that we didn't have when we started this process is a federal cuts and layoffs. A reduction in force was not something anybody could see coming. However, it's the reality of where we are, and we're trying to process how that's going to be affecting not only City of Greenbelt, but the region as a whole. Again, there's a lot of regional competition, and we were just discussing how College Park, and again, College Park is a different animal than Greenbelt, but there is a lot of regional competition with the peer cities and their redevelopment. Again, perceptions are a tricky topic to discuss. Some of these perceptions can be city, county, statewide. but perceptions of crime, perceptions of the school performance, whether they are based in reality or not, in some ways is irrelevant, right? It's the perception that counts, as difficult as that may be. And I've seen that again in a lot of places, depending on the community. So retail disinvestment, that's, you're seeing retail spaces that haven't, the interiors have not been updated. There hasn't been a lot of redevelopment of existing places. More investment in that would be something that we would look for. And again, high interest rates. That's a real threat, not just for the city of Greenbelt, for the region as a whole. We're in this awkward situation where interest rates really can't come down because of the uncertainty in the market and the tariff situation that we're seeing, because that's looking like it's going to create more inflation, and that's sort of competing interest right there. We've all been waiting for those interest rates to come down, and we've heard feedback that some things will not get built until we see those interest rates come down. Where are there opportunities? There's a great number of public and private opportunity sites that are ripe for redevelopment. You're going to see that, I think, a little bit farther along in this presentation. An abundance of regional collaboration resources. I think the county really does listen when Greenbelt has something to say. I do think there are some resources there that you guys can really be leveraging. You can leverage transit bike and pedestrian investments. And again, branding and placemaking, especially here. I think there's a lot that can be done in the center here. And going out and getting grant development programs, looking for monies that can help supplement your capacity as a city to help your help your businesses. Before I get on to this, I just want to say, again, this is feedback that we received from the business community. We've tried to kind of give you large topics to kind of understand what that feel is. This here is kind of what is missing in Greenbelt from what we've heard. That's third places for employers and employees to go after work or at lunch, places where they want to take their clients or their business partners. They're looking for a little bit more diversity there. Competitive and revitalized retail. Again, that kind of goes back to the retail disinvestment. New housing construction and activity. Some of that, I think, especially on the Beltway Plaza project, are paused. I do know there's a repetition there in competitive retail. Local government culture, being open to support growth and change. That's something that we heard a few times, and I think it goes back to sort of that resistant to change sentiment. And again, words that you would use to describe doing business. Resistant, unpredictable, frustrating, challenging, bureaucratic. I think the bureaucratic really comes from a lot of the county issues. We heard topics such as there's people in the county and different departments don't talk to each other. If everybody could just get on the same page and really work to get through that process, it would be better. But again, development projects and development process is always frustrating in a lot of ways. It's sometimes designed to be that way. But those are really sort of the keys. And here are just some quotes, and I'm going to read these directly because when you hear them out loud, I think they can resonate a little bit. The city seems resistant to change even when projects align with community values. There's skepticism towards developers that make collaboration really difficult. Roosevelt Center is approaching the land that time forgot. It needs reinvestment to survive into the future. You never know how a project's going to be received, so the process feels unpredictable. And Greenbelt is cautious to a fault. The fear of losing its identity overshadows opportunities. So the input was pretty consistent. I think the developers that we talked to, the business owners, the small business owners that we talked to, are really looking for a proactive approach to bringing businesses in or helping to grow business, for the city to say that they're open to working with people. And I think part of the implementation of this is how we can do that without losing that sense of what Greenbelt is, right? I mean, this isn't a zero-sum game, right? So we have to figure out how we can be open for business, but still keep that culture that defines the city. I know that was a lot. If anybody has any questions.
I have exactly 4 more slides, so I don't think it'll take a lot of time.
Okay.
To go back, I'm sure that there's a lot to talk about with that last round there. Okay, so we're now moving into the findings and recommendations. So I'm taking all of this input from your business community, the data from your existing conditions, looking at, the profiles of other development activity. We decided to focus on how to put together, an organized strategy that would enable the city to both, leverage your assets to unlock value in, city-owned property, and through what I would call like a place-based lens, figure out how to align your resources with the opportunities that we think will bear the biggest, the greatest fruit in the near term. And where we landed was by organizing these economic development strategies into basically 3 buckets. The first are revitalization target areas. Second are growth target areas, and finally, opportunity areas. The opportunity areas, I wanted to start with that one because those relate to city-owned properties. And first and foremost, we have the Armory redevelopment site, which we understand is being evaluated by another consulting team. We have been collaborating with them from the beginning of this, so we've been sharing information, and so we believe that we're pretty well up to date with some of those preliminary findings. And we have landed on, a clear opportunity for some form of redevelopment where the city could retain ownership of that site and potentially enter into some sort of joint development or public-private partnership that would enable the city to generate some revenue for office space or some other use that it really is to be determined. If you were to do that, there could be some opportunity to relocate your city administration building here and then open up this site for other city uses or some other redevelopment. And then finally, and then I'm going to put a big asterisk on this because we're not entirely sure what the opportunities are, but we wanted to include the fire station site since it is a site that is under evaluation for some other use at some point. But we're going to leave that pretty like as a sketch for some future evaluation. Yes.
Correct. How do you get both of those properties in there? You want to develop both properties, then we have no fire department. Because we promised our people at the fire department that they were going to get a new firehouse at the Armory site. Now all of a sudden, okay, we're going to develop it, and then we're going to develop the existing firehouse site. You gotta make up your mind, one or the other, because we have to have a fire department. So I don't understand how you're getting both of those sites in, looking for more development. I don't want more development on either one of the sites, other than I want a firehouse up on Southway at the Armory, where we promised it would be, because that provides access to all areas of the city more easily for our fire and rescue people. That's what our goal was when we promised that we're going to have a firehouse up there. Because we need to be able to access the entire city more easily.
Well, I think that's getting a little bit off topic, but I would just briefly point out that is one of the if you'd attended any of the Armory public engagement sessions, there are proposals, but it doesn't need to be only the fire department. There's enough space there to do other things besides just the fire department. Was presented.
I don't think there is other space, because if you want to cut down the woods up there, okay. I don't want to cut down the woods.
So we're just listening to this report right now, Mr. Roberts. We can talk about we can go into great detail, and the public is engaged in this process. So you'll have to actually attend one of the sessions to understand what's being discussed. But be that as it may, please go on.
I think we should move on to the next slide, because I do agree, the question of the fire station, it's outside of the scope of what we're going to discuss this evening.
It's a big scope.
Okay, moving on to revitalization target areas. So we acknowledge that there are some target areas that are outside of the city's control. These are privately owned assets, and the strategy would, it really envisions the city just advocating for reinvestment in those sites. And first and foremost, of course, is the Roosevelt Center, which we heard in literally every interview that we had, that there is a great deal of concern about the current conditions of the Roosevelt Center and the absentee landlord. And, that looks like that at some point in the future, things will change, and there could be some opportunity to at least, in the meantime, establish a city vision or some guidance that there's an expectation that that property is going to be managed and frankly maintained. And beyond that, the Greenbelt Road corridor also came up in literally every single interview as it's been studied to death, and finally we've got some major investment going in around it, and this is the opportunity to really leverage that private investment by advocating for either the state or Prince George's County with the state to divert funds there to finally implement some of the bike and pedestrian and placemaking recommendations that have already been made. And along those lines, we're recommending, just as a community branding component, to evaluate 4 different points along Greenbelt Road for what we call monument signage or gateway signage. And I know this has been also kicked around for several years, but we think that as reinvestment and redevelopment occurs along that road, that there needs to be some sort of cohesive plan at the city level, because we believe that's how you're going to overcome the physical barriers of the highways bifurcating your city into these three, the 3 green belts. If you could move on to the next slide. Oh, yes?
Leah, I wanted to just make a quick comment, thought. So, council has the opportunity to interact with our peer municipalities here in Prince George's County, around the state, and around the country sometimes through the National League of Cities. So when I'm talking to peers, council members from other parts of the country about community development, economic development, a major topic is always blighted property and vacant housing. And I have to tell them, we don't really have any vacant housing in Greenbelt. We don't have any blighted housing. So with on the commercial side of things, we do have some areas that are especially stagnant. In particular, just, we've got 2 mall areas, and one of the mall areas that we haven't really been focusing on much at all, has a vacancy rate of, I don't know, it's probably about 50-60% at least, and 2 of the units that are facing the street have been empty for almost a year. It's Cinco de Mayo right now, and traditionally that one of those areas would be packed. So at what point would you start to consider an area, a development owned by a property owner, to be blighted?
That's a really good question. And in fact, we are including a retail strategy as part of our recommendations. And we've been working with John Mason, who's been doing a lot of new outreach, as we mentioned. And he's been getting together with the property manager, which really hadn't occurred in the past. So we think that, with this plan, we are going to directly address especially those large vacancies on the pad sites that are on Greenbelt Road. So the city has already, when I say the city, staff has already identified those sites and is taking the bull by the horns to communicate a new message that, we're not happy about this, this isn't helping us, and what are you going to do about it? So I think that, and to answer your question, in our opinion, what is defined as blight, if you have vacant properties that are then dragging down the other businesses within a center, that is, not just an area of concern, but really it needs to be addressed either through, we don't want to use right out the gate any type of code enforcement. We're not leading with code enforcement or anything like that, but it is something that needs to be held in your back pocket, because at times that's the only way that you can get the attention of especially property owners that are out of state or just absentee.
Yeah, I don't want to dwell on that, but it's something that has been of concern. Lately, I've been thinking about that as time sort of goes on. So, speaking of time, we only have a little bit of time, and
Yep.
I really feel like we're going to have to. I'd really like to come back and have a deeper dive when we have a little bit of time in the month of June. So, if you can kind of wrap it
Yeah,
up.
I'm wrapping up right now with what I think is where we want to stick the landing. So the third primary focus of our recommendations is the growth target area that we're labeling the medical mile. So this is where you have this high concentration of medical and healthcare businesses that we think can link to the biosciences concentration that Olivia has identified within this ecosystem within not just Prince George's County, but really a much larger submarket. And so you've already got this concentration, and there's a huge opportunity to build on that. And that's going to really show up in the marketing and branding plan. And this is where you're going to have something, as Josue mentioned, to go back to the Business Journal to say, this is what the city of Greenbelt is getting behind in terms of the types of businesses that we want to attract into this specific geographic area. So I think there's one more slide. Okay, so our next steps are the implementation and funding plan, and really what's ahead. We've got to incorporate your feedback and then create this draft plan and work with staff to schedule another work session that we really would consider to be a consensus building kind of activity. And then we would present the plan for your consideration for adoption. And internally, we are expecting, depending on when we get all of your feedback and you say that you're ready for us to cut us loose to get that next bit of work done, to have that done in the month of May, or at the latest June, at the next June 23rd meeting, which I think is the second meeting in June is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, thank you so much. Open it up to council. And also, I'm going to ask Mr. George or Mr. Summerone to kind of just frame where we are with this process and talk a little bit about staff and everything else. Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, and I have some small granular comments that I'll just send via email. But the one bigger thing that I noticed glancing through the longer report was, I think you have estimates of the. I think it could be useful to incorporate some of the information that COG put out more recently about the federal employees that live in Greenbelt, and there are some estimates of that. I think it's about 14-15%. And so I know that's not necessarily jobs in Greenbelt, but I think especially with some of the concerns about job losses, and then that doesn't count the contractors, which are another 5, 10, 15% potentially.
Yeah.
And I think that those reports probably came out since, I know it came out since you started this process, but probably even since you did the reviews. And I think the city manager has those links. I just think that would be a useful piece to incorporate into this as well.
Councilmember McKinney?
I have two questions. The first is, and my apologies, I need to go back and read the full report in greater detail than I have, but was there anything that spoke to I guess, the types of developers that would help us to stimulate the type of growth that we wanted to see? Because I wonder with, we talked about it, blighted properties and things like that. Do they have the expertise to move us forward, or are they still, like, what is their operating model that would help us to move that forward? And should we be kind of expanding that? Hopefully that question made sense. And then I'll ask the second question.
I think that we should probably connect offline on that question because, again, that we've prepared several developer profile or development profiles, I should say. And I think that by digging into that, I'd be able to answer your question, but probably not in this venue at this exact moment.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, do you have, in order to focus us when we're providing feedback, are there specific questions or things that you would expect to hear back from us that kind of give us some sort of guiding questions as we're reviewing the full report?
I would say that we are looking to you to prioritize your resources. And so we need to understand, like, what do you need to get out of this plan? That would be the primary question that we are asking of you. And that could take the form of many different, like I said, it could be a policy, a program, an initiative, or some specific outcome, and then we can work towards it from there.
Okay. Other comments from council? And at this time, Mr. George or Mr. Summerone, do you want to just kind of frame where we're at and what you think this information is telling us?
There's a lot of useful, insightful information in the report. And just to reiterate what Molly just stated, that part of the process, the next time that we get together, it's consensus building. We've looked at the data. We've got some recommendations. How do we build consensus on what we prioritize and what direction we move forward? So that will be the next step, and we'll work to get this scheduled in June.
Yeah, in June. That's my desire.
Okay.
I just think this is really important, really timely work.
We have 2 dates in June that need to be scheduled. We'll work with the team to figure out what day we can get this on the schedule. So that will be the next step, and then once we've got that consensus built in, the team's also working on a funding plan because the initiatives require resources, staff time, and financial resources. We'll need to put those plans together and figure out a way to fund them.
There's one thing I wanted to ask. So we've done some previous work around economic development, working with contractors or consultants. I think back in the 80s or 90s, there was a gentleman that did a pretty extensive study on Roosevelt Center. And I guess back in 2021 or 2022, we had Anirban Basu actually came in, and he actually coined that term, medical mile, which is, it's a good call. He talked about incentives quite a bit and trying to find ways to encourage building owners, really the office space builders, to kind of revitalize their work. And finally, we had Stuart Eisenberger, who's the longtime chair of the Hyattsville Community Development Corporation. He did a little bit of work for us. I assume you took a look at those that previous work. But it sounds this is a whole lot of good information. So I'll take a question from the public if there's one online, but we really need to move on to the next topic, and so that you can get back to work, giving us more of the basis for us to make good decisions. Questions from, let's see, we've got Mr. Orleans over there first. And then
Bill Orleans, Greenbelt. The 20 or so slides that were shown just now may reflect what's in the slide, the presentation in the handout, but they are also substantially different. And I'm wondering why the slides that were just shown, not the slides in the presentation in the handout, were not also on the table for us to be able to read more easily than straining from 40 feet to see what's on the screen. Is there an answer for that? And I presume they will be available on request, but is there an answer to why they weren't on the table tonight?
Tim?
No, we had a pack of them. They arrived kind of late in the evening. We didn't have a chance to put them out before we started, but they're right here in the folder. We can hand them out.
Well, I'm anxiously looking forward to the second part of this work session, but it would seem to me, since it's agreed by, I think, everybody who's spoken, that a deeper dive on this subject is necessary, why it wasn't, the deeper dive didn't occur tonight, rather than having another work session, which council might very well be interested in loading something in addition to it sometime in June. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I am requesting a copy of this.
Please go ahead.
The second presentation, Mr. Mayor, I don't think we have time to get through, so we'll reschedule that presentation.
Right.
I
I'm really
apologize
anxious
to
to-
John, who's eager to dive right into his presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Mason. Are you sure? Okay. Okay. Because I know you've been hard at work. Please.
Thank you. I guess this is on.
You could
All right.
just
So I'm Debbie McKinley. I live in GHI, and so I'll be quick because I actually have 4 or 5 things here. The first question is the report that is on the city website. Is that available for public review and comment? In other words, may we provide comments on that document in writing to the city council?
The answer is yes. This is a draft. This is currently a draft. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So and I'll probably highlight these in my comments as well, but one of the things that has recently affected the economic climate in the entire country, of course, are the tariffs, and I don't know to what extent they were able to be incorporated into the report, so I'm hoping in the next version those can be addressed. The other issue is in terms of employment. I believe that there is an executive order for federal employees to return to work. So I don't know how much of the remote workforce that was accounted for is actually no longer remote and has been asked to return to work. The other issue is I didn't see anywhere in the report where climate change and the necessary resiliency associated with that was addressed as perhaps a threat, and because the development will reduce our availability, or reduce the availability of the city of Greenbelt to be resilient to the anticipated climate change here, which is more intense storms and higher precipitation. And that's it. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. So, Molly, Rick, Olivia, thank you so much for the good work that you are continuing to do with our staff, and with some additional input from the public and from council, we can move towards completing this draft and then focus on consensus building and solutions and strategies, not solutions necessarily, because you have what were you saying today, Mr. Summerone, about having a plan? What was that?
Oh, that, we create the plan, develop a plan, and then we work the plan. And so a lot of our work here in my administration, our team is, coming up with the plans. We were specifically talking about the EV infrastructure plan, and how we've gotten a bit ahead of ourselves with having adopted an EV plan, but we're working actively, investing and working on EV infrastructure. And so your question was, do we need to do this on May 12th? And we said, not essential, but it's important that we approve the plan so that we can work the plan.
So we make the plan, we work the plan, we hope for success. Sometimes there are unintended good consequences. So that's what having a good plan brings about. It creates opportunities. Sometimes you don't know what direction those opportunities are. But if you have a good plan, you are more likely to get there faster. So thank you for your work.
Thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you again in June.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, we're going to pivot, and we're going to pivot to a discussion about refuse, recycling service fees and services, and the pay-as-you-go, pay-as-you-throw proposal. And we've got members of the Greenbelt City staff here with us. We've got a full contingent or partial contingent from our Green ACES Advisory Board. And we've got a lot of folks here who are from the public. And it almost looks as though the entire GHI board is here with us. If I didn't know any better. And it looks like Green ACES is getting set up. So, Mr. Samarone, how do you want to run this work session?
Well, the team is organized. If I could have Green ACES join us at the table and have Lisa and John and Tom kick us off with what we're talking about today. Primarily, the focus is on the pay-as-you-throw, but we also have, do you want to introduce Kristen, who from Waste Zero, that has a presentation?
Excellent, excellent. I got to tell you, if you guys needed refuge, I could have brought something from home. I got a couple of bags. I got some food scraps, too. Hey, so welcome, everybody. Pull up a chair.
So, Mr. Mayor, just some context to the conversation. Part of the budget proposal includes an adjustment to our solid waste collection fees, which have not been adjusted in 9 years. We have fallen significantly behind on collecting revenue to make a sustainable waste collection service. This issue is compounded by the fact that the county has raised the tipping fees on the city, not just on Greenbelt, but all the municipalities that tip at the county landfill. So those costs are a little over 20% in just year one, and they'll go up almost another 20% in year two. So we are already in a deficit. We're
facing
city
financial pressures because of this.
Correct. So the city has been subsidizing waste collection services for many years now. The issue is compounded by the fact that overall the city finances have taken a big hit. And this year we needed to close over $4 million budget deficit, and so closing that significant deficit highlight the fact that we were subsidizing waste collection. In order for us to be able to cover that deficit from the general fund, we needed to make additional cuts elsewhere, and we made significant staff cuts in the proposed 2026 budget. So we thought it was financially prudent to raise the waste collection fees that haven't been raised in over 9 years.
Understood.
And one more thing, I apologize, that while we're raising fees, it's good as time as ever to review the model and looking at creative ways of adjusting the model in a way that puts the burden on the folks that are the biggest consumers or users of the system. So incentivizing the right behavior that you want to see. Overall, the city has made strong commitment to reduce its landfill dump by having a robust recycling and composting program, looking at the financial model that incentivizes reduction of waste throw-in is an important tool to consider in this process as we're raising fees.
Yeah, appreciate that context. So we've got John Lippert, who is the chair of our Green ACES committee, and Luisa Robles, who is our sustainability coordinator, and we have a representative from Waste Zero. So Luisa and John, do you want to kind of frame things, and we'll kind of just dive right into this? Do you want to talk?
Well, following what our city manager just explained, Green ACES and the Green Team was tasked to come up with recommendations. So we looked at 3 different areas, and they all seem to have a synergy. They all seem to work very well together. So we'd like to discuss those 3. Now, the first item was, as Mr. Samarone said, increasing the fee for trash and recycling collection and disposal.
And there's a handout with this information. So, Ms. Anderson, can you put that up on the screen for people from listening in on Zoom or Facebook, cable TV can see it as well. And I think on the agenda, that's the first one, Green Aces Green Team. It's a PDF, solid waste. So just want to say it. Please go ahead.
So we looked at different rates of communities around us. There were some, Rockville and Montgomery County, they were 500 or over 500 or almost 500 a year. We are currently charging $280 a year, and the county has its own collection, as you know, in areas that are not incorporated, and they are charging just under $360 a year. So we were recommending that the city raise the rate to $360 a year, which amounts to $90 a quarter. And currently, city households are charged $70 a quarter. So this rate, I know I was at the city council meeting back in March where you were discussing either a 2-year or a 3-year step-up program, and that it was that you were considering either raising it the first year to either $336 a year or $350. We are recommending that you raise it to $360, which $10 a year more than your $350, just a couple dollars more a month. So that's our one recommendation. The second recommendation deals with what's known as a pay-as-you-throw. It's got plenty of other names, and we were fortunate to have Waste Zero come to us and give us both advice and information on this type of new type of model that is being used around the country. So I'd like to introduce you to Kristen Brown, who is your vice president, right? Okay. Well, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think you have to push a button.
I think as long as the red light's on.
I don't think it's on.
Not working. It's not on.
Not yet. Just warmer. There you go. Oh.
Sorry, we're getting reports that they're not hearing online.
Okay.
So.
There you go.
Better? Okay. Better? Okay. Okay, should I repeat?
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Kristen Brown. I work with Waste Zero. Waste Zero is a benefit corporation, which is a company that is mission-driven, and our mission is the environment. So it's mission before profit. We're very unique. We don't give out big bonuses or have huge salaries, but we love our team. We work with cities, states, towns on municipal waste reduction strategies. We both design them, and then we also run them when they're in place. We're not a hauler, but we just run the logistics and keep the program going. So I have a couple slides that could help with this.
There you go.
Yeah, perfect. So if you can start it. So yeah, so that's Waste Zero. So go to the next one. Our focus is on really simple, actionable solutions that don't require a lot of upfront investment. So we like to get people's feet wet in a program if you like it, and then there's other things you want to add, like additional food scrap collection or something like that, then at least you've moved forward a little bit. You're seeing benefits and savings from the program, and then you can make better decisions in the future about adding additional services. So next, just to get everybody on the same page, if you think about the waste that we generate in the U.S., in the 1990s, back when I started in trash, so it's been about 35 years, we were throwing away about 900 pounds per capita. And the way that we figure that out is we look at the population that's generating a specific amount of waste, and then we divide that, and you get about 900 pounds per capita. Currently, we're running at about 740 pounds per capita. That means 740 pounds of waste we throw away each year on average in the U.S. And over the past 34 years, from 1990 to 2024, there have been a lot of improvements, but not a lot of waste reduction. So if you think about it, you've been drilled on reduce, reuse, recycle, but it hasn't made that much of a shift in the trash. Greenbelt happens to be lower than the average, so you're already doing great. Next slide. But the programs that we work on, we call them pay as you throw, pay your way, unit-based pricing, SMART, all different names across the U.S., depending on what the community wants to call it. We reduce the trash significantly more. So when you talk about moving closer to zero waste and you talk about mitigating the cost, the growing cost of trash, moving to a unit-based pricing or pay-as-you-go or pay-your-way system really changes behavior. So it's super exciting. If you couple that with curbside food scrap collection, which is what you have available now to some of your homes, you can really drill down on the trash. So next slide. So what we're suggesting here, because you currently have a fee, is breaking up the fee so that it's more of a paying-as-you-go system, which is going to help you to reduce the trash and reduce your overall cost. Next slide. Oh, one more. Yeah, one more. Okay, so to put this into perspective, I know Prince George's County just increased your tipping fees, which is very typical, and this is what we're seeing across the U.S. When I started in trash, we had about 6,000 landfills. Today we have about 1,200, actually a little bit less than 1,200 landfills. We have about 75 waste-to-energy facilities where we throw away our trash. So our population grows, we continue to make trash, but our landfills are decreasing. So we really do have an imbalance. The reason that they're decreasing is not necessarily just regulation and cost, but it's really as a landfill closes because it's full, no one wants a new one in their backyard. They really don't. So it's very, very hard to site them. Big companies like Waste Management, occasionally they'll get a new siting for a landfill, but not nearly as many new ones come in as the ones that close because they're full. So we really do have an imbalance and truly a national waste crisis. So next slide. Where most of our work is in New England, and one of the reasons we're focusing sort of on the Mid-Atlantic now is because in New England, we'll be out of capacity by 2041. All of our trash comes down toward Maryland. So Maryland, Pennsylvania, Alabama, Ohio. So all of the trash is moving out of New England, coming south. Now there are some landfills remaining and a few waste-to-energy facilities, but capacity continues to shrink. So as our trash comes and fills up landfills around you, the cost of your trash becomes more and more expensive. And the same thing is going to begin to happen here. So what we want to do is look at a different way of throwing out, of thinking about how you pay for your trash, which will change behavior in a lot of homes. Currently, I know for me, I go to visit friends, and of course, I'm an avid recycler because I've been doing this for so long. But I'll have friends who will say, "Oh yeah, we recycle, we do a great job." But I know that when I'm in their house and open up their trash can, I can see, I try to do it so inconspicuously, but I'll pull all the stuff out and then I'll move it over here.
I'm not going to invite you over to my house.
You don't have recycling in your trash, do you? I mean,
So I know everybody is trying on a level, but are they really, really trying? And have they really, really read the directions? And what this program helps people do is think twice about everything that they throw away. So every time they open up a trash bag, they're thinking differently about their trash. So next slide. In Maryland, you're still doing a pretty good job. You're not shipping that much out of state. You have a couple of innovative legislative initiatives. You guys have food scraps. There are a lot of communities around the DC area that are doing a good job. But shifting to this type of program will really put you ahead of the pack. You'll be better than anyone else in the whole state. So definitely a leader. Next slide. The best way to think about it is right now you're subsidizing trash in the taxes, and you also have a flat fee of $280 a year. And you think about things that you pay for with taxes and fees, and you want to pay, taxes should go toward public goods, keeping the roads, keeping potholes out of the roads, having a good fire department, police department, good schools. But, should your taxes go toward paying for extra trash that you don't need to pay for if you could shift it into a different stream? So we think of trash as not really a public good, but a public bad. And when in thinking about it a public bad, it's better to think about it more like electricity or water usage, where you're paying by the unit. So with electricity, you pay by the BTU. And what this system will do is it allows you to pay a flat fee for a part of your service, but then you pay almost like a BTU. You pay by the bag for what you throw away. And you still pay a flat fee that covers some of those fixed costs of the operation of the system. Next slide. Again, we mentioned this is called unit-based pricing, pay as you go, pay your way, but a lot of different acronyms. You can Google them. You'll see positive and negative things about the program. But the most positive thing about your system is that you have the ability to have choice. A lot of communities where there is no fee and the cost is totally in the tax base, this kind of system seems, it's much more difficult to implement. But in your case, you already have a fee, so residents already know that there's a cost to trash. This is just a way of breaking up that cost into a two-tiered system. Next slide. So how would it work? You currently have your fee of $280, so you would still have a fee, and then you would pay as you go for the number of bags you use and the number of bags that you put out each week. But if you don't like that system, you could opt out and just pay a convenience fee, just a max fee. So you wouldn't necessarily have to do it. Next slide. Unit-based pricing, again, this seems new to Maryland, but if you've lived in Massachusetts, 41% of the communities have it. So you can see this is just a breakout of the state of Massachusetts, but you can see the green and the yellow represent communities that have a form of unit-based pricing, and they're throwing away about half as much as neighbor communities with the exact same demographics that don't have unit-based pricing. So again, as part of this process, we've been working with your teams here, and we can provide case studies and information, also a lot of webinars, so that people can listen and see that this is a new system, but it's kind of a normal system in other parts of the country. So next slide. A quick flip those a few times and the charts roll in. Yeah, these are some, keep going, I think there's 4. These are some just example communities. What's interesting about this program is when you implement it, the behavior changes right away. So the first one is Waterville, Maine, and those are weekly blips. So the blue is before the system was implemented, and the green is after. So trash dropped basically in half when you implement the program, because people are now thinking differently about what they're putting in those trash bags. The next example is another one in Massachusetts. Just you can see this is more about the sustainability of the program. So the year it's implemented was not a full fiscal year, so you can see it drop again, but then you can see the trash stays down when the program is implemented. Same thing with the Malden example. And then the last example is the most interesting, and it's Sanford, Maine. So you can see the trash dropped in 2010, and then you can see a couple of months later, the trash goes up. So when the trash dropped, there was one of the residents that he happened to win the Maine lottery. He didn't like the program, so he lobbied against it with council. He put road signs up, and they eventually overturned it, and they took the program out. So you can see the trash went up. It doesn't go all the way up because this program, interestingly, it sort of makes everyone read the directions, and they say, oh, I can recycle my peanut butter jar, and I can do this. So they think differently. So you see it doesn't go all the way back up, but you can see 3 or 4 years later, trash goes down again. They had a budget crisis, and they said, we have to save money, and how can we do it? And somebody suggested, let's go back to the program. And the gentleman had moved to the Bahamas or someplace, so he was no longer there. So they implemented it again, and they're quite happy with their program. So they're a really good town to talk to. They're really about the same size as you guys are. But they also have really amazing the lowest recycling contamination levels in the state of Maine, so around 5% contamination, and most places have 18 or 14 to 18% contamination. So it's just a great all-around program. Next slide. Next one. So this is.
I have a quick question. I have
yeah?
a question. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
just because you talked about contamination rates, I wondered if you have parallel charts about contamination rates that go along with each of those, just because that is one of my main concerns, that people really, really need to wash out those peanut butter jars in order to make them clean enough for recycling. And so does that contamination rate raise while you're doing this program?
So great question. Don't have any charts with me. It's not something that is necessarily studied afterwards, but I do have good anecdotal evidence from, for instance, Eco Maine, which is the waste-to-energy facility in Maine. Probably 30 communities go there. About 50% of them have unit-based pricing and 50% don't, and they find the ones with it are cleaner. And we think it's primarily just because people finally read the directions. And you might get a few people that deliberately do it wrong or do it wrong because they're new, but you get others that have been doing it wrong all along and read the directions, and now they do it right. So it sort of comes out slightly better, perhaps. It's something we could measure if you do move forward with this over the first year, for sure. But yeah, thank you.
And I was just wondering, so does Massachusetts have similar recycling regulations and laws to Maryland? Glass, is there a deposit on bottles and things like that?
There is, they do have the bottle bill in Massachusetts. They don't have it they do have it in Maine. They don't have it in New Hampshire or Vermont or Connecticut. Well, they do have it in Connecticut. They don't have it in Rhode Island. Yeah, so they do have that. This is just a quick look. Prior to COVID, we did a little bit of work in Maryland. We stopped during COVID, and then this is our first attempt to come back. But we did do a pilot in New Windsor, and so I use this example because they're in Maryland, so a little bit closer. They reduced their trash by about 43%. And we did do a waste characterization before and after. So this kind of looks at what their trash was made up before and what happens to it after by category. So the bottom one there is paper, the orange one is plastic, but you can see the reduction in the overall volume of each material was moved out of the waste stream, shifted into the recycling stream. Some of it is shifted, for instance, textiles get donated, so people change their behavior in every way. Next slide. So this just kind of gives you a little look at, if you think about your trash that you generate and you think about it by the pound, so your low generators are paying about 78 cents a pound, your medium generators are paying 35 cents a pound, and your large generators are paying 13 cents a pound. So right now, those that throw away more are actually paying less per pound, and this would shift the way that system works. Next slide. Again, what we're looking at is a hybrid system, and we've worked with your green team to think about the best way to charge for that system, but it should be fairer to almost everyone, and certainly anyone who reduces and reuses and recycles, and it shifts a little bit more of the cost to those that are generating a lot or don't have time to recycle yet, this is something that gives them just a little bit more incentive to start changing their behavior. So next slide. This is what the green team came up with. We did several different models to look at what a base fee would be and what a opt-out max fee would be. The opt-out max fee would be at $410, so if you want to opt out of the system. And then the base fee would be $220 to $240. That's what they're recommending. So less than your current fee, and then you pay as you go for what you use. So it's kind of infinitely variable. You know, you're paying for exactly what you use. Some people might only use an 8-gallon bag each week.
Right now, John is showing the 8-gallon bag. It's small. For 1 bag a week, it would be $41.60 a year. I'm just saying it so that everyone can hear.
So if somebody, thank you. The small bag would cost 80 cents. So if somebody has one of these small bags to put out every week, it would cost them $41.60 a year.
Hello? Oh, okay. I would like to recognize the GHI Board of Directors, General Manager, and staff. They're here, so if you can also show them the bag and the cost, because GHI has 1,600 units in Greenbelt, which is over 50% of the people that we actually collect trash and recycling from.
So this is the small bag. It's 8 gallon, and this is just an assumption. If you were to buy one of these and use this every single week, it would cost $41.60. So that household would pay $41.60 buying the bags that would be available at the Co-op, Giant, Safeway, for example, and it would cost them then, depending upon, we gave 2 recommendations. Either the base fee would be either $220 or $240. So it's up to council to decide which one you should go with. But there's a number of details there that we want to point out why we recommended one of those 2 options. But it doesn't mean you have to use a small bag every week. I mean, if I think for us, our household, this would probably last 2 or 3 weeks. So, you know, depending upon what we want to do with our trash in the meantime, and hold it, and then we put it out maybe once every 2nd week or every 3rd week. Should I continue, or do you want to call?
Why don't you continue?
This is a medium-sized bag. So this bag would cost a household $1.25 each. If they were to put out one of these, that's a pretty big bag. If they were to put out one of these every week, which they don't have to, but if they needed to, it would cost them $65 a year to buy the bags. So they would be paying the $65 plus whatever the base fee is. Then moving on, this is the large bag, 33 gallon. I don't know when I'd ever use that one. But if the household needs to put out a large bag, they buy this bag. It costs $2. And if they were to put out one of these large bags every single week, that would cost them $104 a year plus whatever their base fee is. Now, if you think about it, you were recommending either $335 or $350 a year to raise the fee to. If we go with the $240 base fee, and someone goes and puts out a large bag every single week, they have to buy this bag, it's another $104. So 240 and 104, according to my
340.
calculations, it's $344. That's still cheaper than your 350 option that you were going to give. Now, just need to mention, there's no requirement that they have to put a certain bag out every week, and you can switch. So if you're having guests over for a big party and you normally have a small bag that you put out, you buy a large bag, and you buy a large bag. It'll cost $2 instead of 80 cents for a small bag or $1.25 for a medium bag, but you pay a little bit more if you have those times when you have to pay more. So, can we go over here? Thank you. So there are, 4 variables that really are important that will determine how much revenue the city brings in, whether you have a slight surplus or whether you have a slight deficit. One of them is the cost of the bag, because the city would get a cut of the bag purchases. And Kristen is...
Yeah, I mean, just like so an example of the medium bag, if the cost of the bag itself is 25 cents, then the city retains the dollar that goes to the revenue, which covers tipping fees and other part of the other fixed expense. So.
And you would be Waste Zero would be willing to work with the vendors to get the bags.
So, right.
And
right.
then would give the city a cut of the bag fees that came into the vendors.
Right. And of course, the city, we're just trying to break even to.
Well,
you know,
I'm going to get to that. So that was one variable, the price of the bag. The second variable is the base fee. Base fee plus the price of the bags if you opt in, if you're participating. So we are recommending 220 or 240. Now, the other variable is the opt-out convenience rate. If somebody says, I don't want to bother with all that, I'm not going to go buy any bags, they'd have to pay $410 a year. That would give them the option of putting out
three
large
large bags.
And if they want to put out more than that, they would still have to go and buy the blue bags. Because if you don't, you could have somebody go to one neighbor that's opting out, and everybody gives them the trash, and they just put it out. We want to encourage people to start donating items, recycling items, and composting. So if you look at this, the other variable that's very important on the amount of revenue that comes into the city is the participation rate. And the higher the participation rate, the less revenue that the city gets. Now, the reason for that is that if there's a 90% participation rate, that means only 10% of the households are paying the high $410 opt-out fee. Everybody else is paying $220 or $240 and buying the blue bags. So as the participation rate goes up, those members, the households paying this goes down, and so less revenue comes to the city. So what Kristen has done is that she put all these variables into a spreadsheet and said, okay, if we have this participation rate, figuring the price of the bags, figuring the opt-out fee, we worked with her on that, and we massaged that. First it was $450, then it was $400. We said, well, figure out what this is all going to be if it's $410. So,
that's worst case scenario.
Yes, right.
So the green here is the sweet spot that has either you've got a small surplus or a small deficit. And we kind of like this part. Kristen was saying, what was your estimate for the participation rate in the first year?
So I think you want to shoot for this 50-60% range. You might get as high as 75%, but I mean, you're going to have people that opt out. So
what's been your experience in implementing this kind of a program, just in terms of the participation rate over time? Number one, and number two, how do you go about working with the various stores? And if not the stores, is the bags, could the city actually supply the bags or sell the bags?
City can supply the bags. It's usually easier to go through the stores, partner with the stores. They carry these bags for hundreds of communities that do these programs. So especially your giant Safeways, the large chains, because they own, different brands across the country. So working with the stores is relatively easy. You do have to go through the process to get it approved, which, again, easy, but takes 2 to 3 months. So it's more about time than it is. I'm not really concerned any of the stores wouldn't want to carry it. You have the small store here, the Co-op. They would probably likely want to participate. It does drive foot traffic. It seems to be easier for residents to pick up bags at the stores where they already pick up their regular trash bags. So you could have them here, but most likely most people won't find that convenient.
Okay.
And when we recommended and the city passed the bag ordinance, the vendors were required to keep track of how many paper bags that they sold at 10 cents a piece. So it's basically the same thing. They're going to have to keep track of how many small, medium, and blue bags that they sell.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even really have to keep track because it's done all electronically. Cases get delivered to them. You guys, we keep track of all the accounting for you. We show you who has how many bags as they're sold out through the stores. The revenue from the stores comes to the city, and then the city shares back the 25 cents with us as the vendor during the first year. We don't have to be your vendor forever. We have other competitors. I'd rather not name them, but we can over time. So, but we would love to help you implement and do this for a year. And if you like it, then we recommend you just go out to bid and look at, how you want to move forward.
And this would be a contractual kind of an agreement with a flat fee, and of course, you being a B Corp, it's about
Helpful.
the mission. It's not about the profit.
It is, right? That's why we usually win, because we're super competitive.
Mayor Pro Tem, then Mr. Roberts.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out while we're looking at this chart that if because we're at this deficit of where the city is right now without changing our fees would be minus 279 on that chart, right? Like not on this chart, but if you're thinking about how it compares to what we have now, if we don't change our rates at all, we're at minus 279. It's trying to get rid of it in about a 2-year cycle, so about half of that. So with changing the fees to the proposed 336 next year, we would be at minus, I didn't do that math quickly enough, 165, I guess, more or less. Right, changing the fees to break so I think that's worth noting, that all those negative numbers, even the proposal without this process, has us in those negatives. So this is to the better.
Right, and if you look at, to get those numbers, you'd have to have a 90% participation rate and a very low base fee in order to get that much of a deficit. So we are recommending somewhere here, and if there's a 50% participation rate, it's projected that there'd be 71,000. These are in thousands. So $71,000 surplus at 50% participation rate, 47,000 because fewer people were paying the high opt-out fee, $47,000 surplus, $22,000 surplus. Here, you got to go all the way up. If you go with $240 base fee, you got to go all the way up to 80% participation rate to get a minus. which is minus 3,000, which
Got
is
it.
nothing compared to what we're losing right now. And then if we get 90%, which is really, really, really good, we'd still only lose $27,000.
Right. Got it. Mr. Roberts?
I got a couple questions. One is, how does all this number-wise compare to the people in the city who don't have city trash collection? Private collectors, how do our fees stack up to the
Yeah,
private
I
collectors?
was
Because,
wondering about that.
you know,
How
we
do
have in the past had more customers, but a lot of them dropped out because they could get it cheaper elsewhere.
So how do we incentivize
So how-
some of the other
How does
developments in
that,
the
how
city
does that
become
look?
involved?
I can address a little bit of that since we had an HOA recently wanting to shift to the city. They shared with us how they were having their waste and recycling collected, and they're currently very unhappy with the service they're getting. It is a little bit cheaper than what the city charges, but the services are also way less than what the city does. So if you want just a basic service of someone comes and picks up your trash and your recycling, but there's no bulk trash, there's no yard waste, there's no, any of the extra services that the city provides, then yeah, maybe you can get a much lower price. But then what do you do with your yard waste and your bulk trash when you don't have anyone that's providing that service? If you do count those services into account, then the city is actually charging way less than anyone else. The county provides similar services to the city, and not even for bulk trash, you're only allowed to put out your bulk trash a certain number of times per year with the county. We here in the city can put it out whenever you want to put it out. You just call it in, we pick it up. The county is charging $360 per year, whereas we're charging $280 per year. Montgomery County, City of Rockville, Gaithersburg, they're in the $500. So our costs are way low for the services we provide. If you want to compare to lower services, that's a different thing. But do we want to provide lower services to the city, or do we want to keep the amount of service that we're providing?
Well, I'm not saying we should do either, but, people make up their own minds. And a lot of people go for the cheaper thing. So that's just one of my questions. But the other question is, how do you keep track of all this? I mean, if I throw out a small bag this week and a big bag next week, who's counting it? Are the guys that picking up the trash saying, okay, we got a purple one here and a green one there?
Yeah,
how do you keep track of that?
You don't have to count them. When you purchase them in rolls of 5 at the grocery store, and you pay the supermarket. Then the supermarket pays the city the revenue that comes in. So the trash collector is not counting the bags, he's just picking them up. So the job doesn't change at all for those on the ground.
So what happens when somebody puts out 3 big bags?
They've paid for 3 big bags.
Well, what if it's not one of the bags that you buy?
So-
what if it's another bag they had, or a
So
different
if-
color or a different size or whatever it is?
Yeah, so if you've opted for the convenience fee, you have a sticker for your container, and then you're allowed to put out 3 large bags. They don't have to be special bags. If you don't opt out and you're just part of the program, if you put the wrong item, the wrong bag out, it would be treated similarly to what you do now. If someone puts out something like a propane tank or an item that the city doesn't collect, there would be some sort of notice left to the household. Obviously, when the program begins, in order to get everybody accustomed to it, you have a couple weeks of training and notices for residents. But if you put out the wrong bag, you get a notice, and then it isn't collected until it's put in the appropriate bag.
Sound awful complicated. Personally, I think that if we're really serious about recycling, we will stop making all the stuff that we don't need. Until we can do that, until we can stop making them plastic bottles and the plastic bags and all that stuff that, by the way, we never had when I was a kid. There was no, plastic floating around. So our civilization can live without it. Until we can get majority of, stuff that we make and stuff is still ended up in the garbage bin. And we don't need to, like I said, we don't need to make all that stuff. We don't need to make them plastic bags.
Councilmember Niesel.
So my concern as a single parent of 3 is that there are very few utilities that scale up the way that trash does. If we're all in the same room, we're not using 4 times the electricity that someone's using while they're in their one room watching television. I know that to save money, because I'm a single parent of 3 on a very fixed income, I would crush as much as I possibly could into that large bag, and I'm going to break our trash workers' back. So that really concerns me about, it feels like it could be penalizing the larger families and people on fixed incomes. I also, in GHI, we only have the small recycling bins, and they're completely uncovered. I have heard tell that I can buy a lid, but it's never, every time I go, it's not been available. So I know for a fact that 1, I overfill my recycling bin every week, and 2, almost every week that we have rain, it gets contaminated. They're not going to be able to recycle any of the paper or cardboard that I put in there because it's gotten wet. So until we have either introduced larger totes or the possibility of larger totes for recycling or provide lids to all households within GHI, I'm really hesitant to get behind an idea like this that pushes everything into the recycling stream, because I know that you have seen in other communities that it hasn't increased the contamination rate, but I do worry about that here. And then I have witnessed personally people coming and dumping their household trash items at playgrounds, and I think it's one of the reasons that in many playgrounds we no longer have trash cans. I worry about how this could increase that type of behavior in places where we are already seeing a lot of illegal dumping. So those are kind of my main concerns. What would you say in response to any of those?
So I'll go with the last one. On the illegal dumping, definitely you won't see more illegal dumping. We don't ever see it. It's always the first question that everyone asks. But when people look at illegal dumping, it's usually the big, large items. It's really rare that someone takes their trash and, the full trash bag, especially in a program like this. If you do have dumping, we recommend looking for the name. It would then be considered in theory litter, so there would be some penalties that go along with the dumping. But it's really a rare occurrence for people to change their behavior over this. The great thing about this program is that you can opt out, and you don't necessarily have to participate in the bag part of it, so you're not forced to use it.
Address your other concerns. So you can get a second or a third recycling bin for free, and we do have lids. I just saw them today. So if you wanted to purchase a lid, you can do that. And another thing, I've heard you use the term contamination a couple times erroneously. So contamination, when we talk about contamination in recycling, is not whether you cleaned out your peanut butter jar properly or not, or whether your paper is wet or not, is whether you have a propane tank in your recycling bin, or plastic
number
bags,
6 or number
or
7.
number 6 or 7s in your recycling bin, or a styrofoam in your recycling bin. That's contamination. Not whether the container itself is perfectly clean or not, or the paper is wet or not. Actually, wet paper, it doesn't matter. It still gets processed and it still gets recycled.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Then I had wrong information. What should I call it then if there's peanut butter in the peanut butter jar, if it's not
It's
contamination?
just dirty recycling. Yeah, so we want clean recycling, not dirty recycling, but contamination is items that do not belong in the bin. Yeah, and yes, we can give you more bins for free, and the lids, unfortunately, you have to purchase, but you can also purchase your lids.
Okay.
And there's going to be an education component. We understand that it's going to be a major effort. Kristen said Waste Zero is willing to work with us to do that. So we need to educate everyone about how this program works and what they need to do. So we understand that. The nice thing when she brought this to our attention was that the third element for solid waste disposal and that's food scraps. And as you all know, we have a current curbside food scraps pickup program that is fully funded by the USDA grant that expires in August. And we have 410
Yep.
410 participants currently, which was what the program was striving for. And they're getting it free of charge, paid for by the grant. Now, the grant is completed in August, and we would like to have the city subsidize to continue this program. It has benefits to the city because if all of the participants continue to participate after the grant, it reduces the WIC going to the landfill by approximately 120 tons, which equals about $10,000 in tipping fees every year. So it's also helping the city reduce the tipping fees. And the nice thing about this sweet spot is that, geez, if we only get a 50% participation rate, that's $71,000. That's just about the number that we would need to subsidize, I believe, and I've got it in my in the Green Aces recommendation, so that the people could continue getting it for free for the next 10 months, which is through the end of the year, end of the fiscal year, the new 2026 fiscal year. There would be 10 months remaining after the end of the grant in August. So if you get that, or this would be, you know, very helpful to help subsidize at the various rates. So it depends on what you decide. If you decide you want to go with the pay as you throw, these are what we recommend, either this or this is the base. And then you can get a feel for what the revenue is going to be. Are you going to have a surplus, or are you going to have a deficit? And if it's a deficit, this is about how much. And if there's a surplus, could you please, we would like you to put that to subsidize for continuation of the curbside compost pickup, food scraps pickup program.
Hey, thank you very much. So just a couple of quick questions. Councilmember McKinney, do you have a question?
Yeah, well, maybe more of a request. I'm not sure if you can do this or not, but I think it would be helpful if the model could show how the curbside composting would help with the charges to an individual, in addition to modeling it for what the revenue would be to the city. Because I think being able to see one complete number so that a resident will know, okay, it actually is more than whatever our base is plus the bags, because if you really want to keep to the bags, you really got to do kind of the curbside composting to keep that down. So what is the actual all-in number that potentially, if the curbside composting does not get refunded in August, or we don't subsidize that, what potentially could be the cost to a resident? Does that make sense?
To continue the program, is that what you're saying? The curbside compost pickup program, if there's no subsidy and if the grant has ended?
Correct. So if the
Well-
grant ends in August, right?
Yeah.
And it is not subsidized, there would be a cost for people to participate in
Yes,
that.
yes.
So participating in curbside composting also keeps the waste down that you would be going into these trash cans. So
Right.
it's really a benefit to participate both in curbside composting plus if we were to go with this program. But I think in order to make sure it's clear to residents, it would be great to understand the full in number for both of those.
Well, as you know, the USDA grant allowed the construction of a local composting operation at Trinity Church in Greenbelt off of Hanover Parkway. So if it continues at 400 and some participants, compost crew, which operates it, said that they could continue to provide the service, and it would they would charge 20, was it
It was
21 or $19?
$19.13.
$19.13 per person without the subsidy. Is that somewhat what you're looking at?
That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
Just being able to see, like, I love this, being able to see this chart, because you can see both cost to a resident plus cost to the city. And I was just saying, how could we jointly show both of them together? I understand that, one, not everybody participates in curbside compost, and we don't have at least the capacity right now to expand it to the whole city, which is something that we want to talk about.
Can we pull up the chart that talks about, just, yeah, that chart, yeah. Because that
Yes.
We do have the capability of bringing your food scraps to the Bariatric Park drop-off center, which is already part of the city budget. So anyone that wants to participate in the bag program can bring their food scraps to the lake for free. If they want to participate in the curbside collection and there's no subsidy from the city, then it's the $19 per month. And I just wanted to address your issue, Ms. Niesel. I want to say Amy, but if you produce one large bag for your household per week, then, and you're paying the base of $240 plus $100, you'd be paying $340 per year, which would be cheaper than what we need to bring the fee up to just to make the city whole. So it would actually benefit you to have a program like this. It'd be cheaper
Oh,
per
there's no
year.
way. There's no way it's fitting in just one bag.
Oh, okay, then it depends how
three
much you
children.
produce. Right. Also, maybe then I could work with you to see how you could recycle more and how you could divert food scraps so that you can bring it down to something that is affordable.
Okay.
This chart, I think, explains what you were talking about. Currently, if the subsidy, the grant subsidy ends, it would cost $21.68 per household if there are 400 and some households participating. Now, that's assuming that the city continues to own the shipping containers that are the composters. So we recommend that Compost Crew purchase it, which they agreed to do. So it would bring that down to $19.13 if there's 400 and some households. Then scenario 3, 4, and 5 is if the city subsidizes and the households only pay $9 instead of $19, so the city would subsidize $10.13, or city subsidy of $7.13 per household, or $4.13. So it explains then the household would pay this subsidy $9 a month. This household would pay, if under this scenario, they'd pay $12 a month. And this is the lowest city subsidy that we've looked at, and it would be $15. And then Louisa has done a survey looking asking the participants, would you be willing to pay something after the grant ends and, would no longer be free? You want to talk about that,
And I have
Louisa?
it here if you don't have it. So this was the survey, and there were 147 responses. So this was done by Compost Crew to the current participants, 147 responses, so about 36% of participants. 98% of people reported being very satisfied or satisfied with the program. 96.6% being very satisfied or satisfied with communication about the program. 73% of people reported that the bin size was just right, and 25% that it was actually too big. And I guess very few people said that it was too small. 78.2% of people reported being very satisfied or satisfied with the customer service. Another 19.7% were neutral. So maybe they never had to contact customer service. And I think this is for the price point. And I think there was they didn't give an option of, I wouldn't be willing to participate if I had to pay zero. But so 100% said they would pay at least $5 to continue. But again, zero unfortunately wasn't an option. So that's a little bit of a mistake. But 78% said they would continue if they would have to pay $10. 51% said they would continue if they had to pay 15, 34% 20, and 15% 25, which is actually more than the total cost it would be. So even if we are not able to fully subsidize, even if we can manage to subsidize some, a good number of people are willing to continue paying. And I think there was also some discussion about whether there might be a way, if some people were willing to pay a little bit more, to help out people who couldn't afford the full amount, and sort of do a scholarship for composting almost.
Okay, so we've got three things on the table really in this work session. One is the recommendation on solid waste, trying to make the city whole, or to keep us from slipping further behind with the fees for solid waste. We really need to do something to reconcile or to put the city in a better place with that. The second item was the presentation on pay as you throw, and there's a variety of scenarios that were put out. The third item has to do just with continuing with the compost crew composting after the grant ends in August. So just a couple of things. I want to remind everybody that these programs, the percentage of Greenbelters that are able to avail themselves of these services, it's really GHI, Old Greenbelt predominantly. So that would be maybe 40% of the city's population. Is that right?
Under that,
A little bit under
because Franklin Park is a huge amount of the population, and we don't service them.
But it's 1,600 GHI households approximately, and there's 2,500 and what? A little more than 2,500 households that get city trash collection and recycling collection.
And I think the stats from the economic development said there were about 10,000 households. So it's actually about a quarter of the households.
Okay, so about 25% of the households, we're really talking about something that affects them. But in terms of the larger multi-family developments, the co-op is certainly the largest by far. So I'm just wondering, implementing this sort of a pay-as-you-throw program, does it or would it affect individuals in any, would it be different for a housing cooperative or a large apartment development, theoretically, to participate? Are there some additional benefits, or is there some other way that a multi-family development could actually benefit by participating in this?
So difficult for multifamily where they're using a common dumpster location. This system really only works in a development that has bins where you can identify yourself as a user, but large dumpsters it won't work. So if about 25% of your homes are in those type of facility locations, then wouldn't work for them. Other single-family homes, maybe like the neighborhood you were talking about, could perhaps opt in if that was something that they were interested in doing, having that type of service.
Okay, so what I'd like to do, there's a lot of people here from the GHI board. I don't know.
Can I just ask one more question?
Oh, sure, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, the opt-in and opt-out and all this stuff, how does that work in GHI? Because GHI is one customer. It's not 1,600 individual customers, because we all pay our bill through our co-op fee. So how does that work? Does GHI have to keep track of that, or, how do you do that?
So I think there's a couple different ways to do it, which you all discussed without me. So I don't know the answer that you came to. But in theory, it could either be done and tracked through GHI, or it could be tracked through the city, and it could be that your GHI fee is reduced. So now you have control of your waste fee, but your GHI fee is the same with respect to all the other things you're covering in that fee. It's just the waste would be excluded from that fee, and perhaps the city would take you on as they do the other individual residents in the city.
I don't.
Would you like to mention some of the comments that were mentioned at the board meeting about what some of the ideas that GHI was thinking? Or
Yeah, and that's what I
is
was
that
sort of
not
driving
appropriate
at. I'd
now?
like to kind of open up the floor to GHI. There's somebody. Kristen, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I do, because I think there's two other points that I think are important to get out on the table, and this was, Dr. Robles alluded to this, the bulk trash is something that GHI already has to call, some of the other neighborhoods don't. That is something that would have to change. Everybody would have to call for bulk trash. That wouldn't, but I think that's not something people will have to get used to, but it's not a huge deal because it's already most of GHI already has to call. And I think the other thing, and this may be something that Mr. Salmarone can address that I think is worth talking about, is the timeline, because of course we're at the beginning of May, but we're not talking about this changing any earlier than the fiscal year, and probably not even right away. So I think that's something that Mr. Salmarone could talk about.
On a timeline perspective, council has yet to take informal action on adjusting or making a decision with either the rate change or program change. We would want to give customers at minimum 30-day notice that a change is happening, given that a resolution would require 2 hearings, and we've yet to schedule those. We're still 2-3 months out from implementing any change. Ideally, I would like to give all customers 45-day notice of any potential change. We would send out notices once resolutions for any proposed change is presented to council. So we haven't started that notification process. Given the timeline now, we need at least 2.5 months, 3 months before we can implement the program with significant change. In terms of pricing, would just be the notification changes. So if council wanted to move forward with, let's say, just hypothetically, with just a rate change, we couldn't enact that change until probably August, as it stands now, based on the timeline.
So we have been discussing the rate change for a little while. We talked about it in March, and I think there's a need to try and adjust the rate just to keep us at parity so we're not losing ground. The pay-as-you-throw proposal sounds intriguing. I think we got a little bit more work to do with that. But as I said, the time, it's about 9:45. There's somebody online who's had their hand up for quite some time, and I'd also like to give the individuals that are here in the room a chance to speak their minds as well. So why don't we, Jay Davis has had her hand up for quite some time. Jay Davis, are you there?
Yes, I am. Jay Davis, Greenbelt East. Several concerns. I'm old enough, and most of the people on the council weren't even on the council, but they might remember when the city changed from twice a week to once a week. There was a great upsetment about that, and it worked out. And then there was some concern about when we started recycling. And I think that this is the question of you have to get the education out. But what I'm concerned about, since I'm from Greenbelt East, and I pay through my condo fee for trash pickup with another contractor. But basically, if the city has close to $300,000 or $370,000 deficit, that deficit is being paid by all the taxpayers of the city, whether they are receiving city trash pickup or not. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's correct.
So it would behoove the 75% of us that don't use the city, they would behoove us to urge the city to make some correction to the trash pickup so that we aren't subsidizing through our taxes what other people are getting for practically free. I know that you're working on the composting, and that's going to take a while. I just wonder, when you're having this system, is there a cost for recycling? Will that be a separate fee?
Dr. Robles is shaking her head.
No, I can't see her whether she's shaking her head or not.
Do you want to address that?
No.
Yeah, so no, there won't be an added charge for recycling. This charge or this model includes trash and recycling and bulk trash and yard waste.
Okay, so the main thing you'd be paying for would be the composting and for the bags of trash.
Yes.
Okay, now, I have the same concerns that Ms. Niesel had about people who would cheat. It may not happen often in other areas. It maybe not would happen in Greenbelt. Greenbelt is pretty careful about it, but there's enough people out there that would be concerned, and they would probably put more into the recycling, even though it's contaminating the recycling. They would just say, oh, well, we'll throw it there. And I know that I've seen it in Greenbrier, convenience. It's easier to take the trash to the doggy bag trash cans and throw the trash there than to go all the way down to the trash room and put your trash down there. People use dumpsters. You just drive by a dumpster, you throw it in. Vacant lots. So there will be some concern, and yes, it may take some investigating, and it may take some time to enforce it, but there will be people who will cheat on this, and you'll just have to deal with it. But it's not going to be zero, that's for sure. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And Dr. Robles, I've got a standing invitation to you to come and visit our garbage rooms over at Greenbrier.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to have you come.
Sure.
The green team is going to go over and check the mayor's garbage bag every time to make sure there's no recycling in it.
My bags are okay.
I wanted to address a little bit of the concern that Mr. Roberts had regarding how would we charge, and that's in part why we asked General Management and Finance from GHI to be here. I don't know exactly how they charge us. I do know, though, that at least once a year I get a breakout of everything that I'm charged for for GHI, and I do know that they have additions, whether you have a big addition or a small addition, and they keep track of all of that. And they do have my trash bill there that's included as a separate line item. So we are paying for our trash as individuals, even though, I don't know, does the city just charge one bill to the whole of GHI?
Yes, based on the...
Yes. Okay, so then we would have to figure out, does the city want to take on the billing, or is there a way for GHI to do it like they do with our additions and other charges that they do, maintenance fee and stuff like that? They're already tracking a bunch of those things. Could this be something that they track, whether you're in or out? It's just two different things. You're either paying the 240 or the 3-something, whatever, 410, whatever council decides. So that would be the only tweaking that would need to be done.
Well, at this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Claggett, Mr. Broad, if you'd like to say anything on behalf of the board. I know the other board members here have had their hands up as well. So we've covered a lot of ground, and I know there's some strong feelings. So please, welcome.
Thank you. Well, we are aware, we think we're about 2/3 of the customer base on this issue, so we appreciate the chance to make our thoughts known. We are concerned about administrative expenses and difficulty. Right now, we get one bill that we pay once a year. So if we're being asked to add an administrative burden of dealing with 1,600 individual trash accounts, that's going to be a big issue for us. We're also concerned that we're in the middle of our fiscal year, so that if you're proposing a large increase, it's going to hit us without our being able to incorporate it into our budget. So we'd appreciate being able to do that as we prepare our budget for next year. The board also said that because we have a large number of households with 1 or 2 people, we're not really sure what the average amount of trash that we put out is. It may well be less than the other third of your customers. We don't have a way of knowing that. It might be a good idea to I don't know how you measure that it may be that we're not in fact what's causing the we may, in a sense, be subsidizing the rest of the people that you service. Have I missed that point that anyone else made? Regarding the two-tier structure, it's possible, of course, for us to decide that everyone's opted in. I mean, we don't necessarily, we like to offer choices when we can, but we don't have to. So, Philip, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to add that I would not like to see a scenario where GHI becomes the de facto educator on this. I'm very much in favor of this program, but I don't want to see our administrative staff burdened with all the questions that we had tonight. Thanks.
Well, that's really why we're having the work session, to sort of hash out some of the questions and get a clearer picture before we move ahead at a meeting and make decisions. So there's still time. Please continue. And if it's okay with my colleagues, I'd like to grant Mr. Brown a little additional time to speak.
Well, the board also did say that very many of our members are interested in recycling and composting and waste reduction. These are issues that a lot of us care about. So I don't want anything I'm saying to be interpreted as somehow negative about these initiatives. We think that they're very good initiatives. We are also concerned about the city's budget. We have our own budgetary issues. We know what it's like to be looking at needing to cut closets. So we are partners with you. We're not adversaries. Is there any? Debbie, did you have something else? Anyone else?
I'm so sorry, could you put up to the microphone? Thank you.
This is Thomas Williams, our Director of Technical Services.
Can you get free soil back?
Can you get some of the compost back?
Yes.
Yeah, and I was wondering, the benefit, if you're paying into this, individual households, could you actually, get whatever appropriate amount of compost back, and that way you'd be getting a direct benefit for the money that you're spending each year?
Well, right now with the USDA compost, we do have a large pile of compost right in front of the GHI building, and you are welcome to take from that compost, and it is beautiful. So we had one delivery a few months ago, and it was delivered to the 3 main city gardens, and we just had our second delivery, and right now there's a big pile in front of the GHI building, and anyone that's participated in the USDA grant program, which I know the GHI has, is welcome to come and take compost from that pile.
Well, would you like to elaborate on what happens after?
So after the USDA grant expires, then unfortunately we would have to purchase the compost from Compost Crew if you wanted it. Right now it's free because it's part of the program. Once it ends, then we would have to purchase it.
But
Compost Crew does give us a discount.
Would give us a discount
compared to what they sell it to non-program participants.
I just think it'd be a wonderful incentive to individuals to participate if they, while they were buying their bags, they knew that at the end of the year or at a fixed time they could actually get some compost back for their yards or their gardens at some point. Be nice incentive. Mayor Pro Tem?
Well, I think that could be something we could negotiate with Compost Crew. It would just change the pricing. So it's not that it was part of the pilot, but we would just have to find out from them what would be the difference in price overall if they continue to offer the compost for free, or maybe you get a certain amount for free. You get one small bag for free, but you have to buy additional. I mean, that's things that can be negotiated.
Right, but we're talking about the curbside food scraps pickup program, not the blue bags with the pay-as-you-throw.
Mr. Roberts?
Is there anybody now that is making any money off of recycling, other than collecting it from us? But I mean, as far as the recycling material, is it worth anything? Plastic, which
yes,
is
it
most
is.
of our trash is plastic.
Plastic, especially ones and twos, are somewhat valuable. White paper is valuable, and metals are valuable.
Yeah, well, I know metals are.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I do have some information on that I could
Well,
share with the board.
Funny though, we seem to not want metals though. I mean, you know, unless it's a can or something like that, yeah, but if someone throws a piece of scrap metal or something in their bin that gets tossed out, they don't take it.
Those kinds of odd metals, you can call them in, and we pick them up on Friday, and they get taken to the scrap metal place. The recycling plant, the MRF, the Materials Recovery Facility, is not capable of accepting those other types of metals, except bottles and cans, just because of the way their system works. But there is a market that will purchase those materials, and we do have markets right now that are purchasing the materials. For the odd metals, you can either take them to PG Scrap yourself or call them in. We'll pick them up on Friday and take them there.
Unless you have a lot of metal, it's gonna cost you more to drive up there than you're gonna get because.
Then we can pick it up for you.
I mean, steel, you know, right now it's not worth much, you know. Some are worth more than others, you know, but.
Maybe they
20
sell
cents a
them
ton.
Some
over
are
in
not.
Berwyn Heights at the scrapyard.
I've got some big old machines that were left on some property that I bought. And I went down to the scrapyard and said, hey, I got this machine. It's like, weighs about 20,000 pounds or so. I mean, it's a big machine and it's good steel. I mean, it's high grade steel. It's not cheap steel to make those machines. Guy told me it would take you it would cost you more to drag it down here than I'm going to give for you. That's what he told me. So it was like, I was disappointed because I was, you know, thinking I might make a couple bucks off of that thing.
Okay. Hey, I appreciated the question about the educational piece. So I'm just wondering, this proposal, the pay as you throw and the increase, are these topics that might come up at your annual meeting?
It could.
Okay, and that annual meeting is coming up.
If there's a committee that wants to have a table at the annual meeting, they're welcome to. We do have tables and information available at the meeting.
Okay.
Can you tell us when our annual meeting is?
Annual meeting's on Thursday evening,
Oh, this Thursday.
the 8th of May, Thursday.
Uh-huh.
In the
Thursday,
community
yeah.
center.
Let's see, Mayor Pro Tem, and I see there's another question from the public.
Yeah, I think related to the education, because I believe, Ms. Brown, you said it's part of what Waste Zero can help with is some of that education, as well as, I mean, I don't want to speak for Green Aces, but, you know, we already will have a table at, for example, the Green Man Festival this coming weekend, but I believe you said in some of your previous presentations that that's something you can help with.
Yeah, if you plan to move forward, we would love to be part of the outreach program so that we have a team of people that can work with Green Aces together. We can do some door-to-door, just saying hello, explaining how it works, doing a waste audit, which we do a lot of. We help you, we can go into your kitchen and give you ideas about things that you can do differently with your trash. So, yeah, we'd love to be part of the initial outreach, which you're going to need 3 to 4 months or so.
Yes.
You know, to make sure everyone understands what's coming.
Well, thank you, Ms. Brown. It's been very, very informative. Let's see, Mr. Orleans, do you have a comment? Do you have a question or a comment or what?
I don't run out of time if I get back to the most interesting thing that said tonight, that was said by Ms. Grover, that a condo association has reached out to her in the city, maybe seeing to shift where their refuse and recycling energy food scrap too goes. I've suggested in the past that this is a discussion that should take up the whole of a given work session as to whether or not the city should continue to allow, almost encourages, much of the population of Greenbelt to contract for their own refuse and recycling collection, as well as all the commercial entities that contract for such. The city, if it chose to, could by ordinance require that all refuse and recycling be picked up by the city. And I think while many people would object to that, the cost to the city would be reduced in that we would not have all these private carters coming through and doing the damage to the roads that they do. And as was said in this room on last Thursday night, while we're not New Jersey, nonetheless, private carting, even in Maryland, is problematic. But that aside, I would hope we would all agree with Councilmember Roberts that there's too much stuff that we throw away. We all throw away. I don't know how to resolve that problem. Of course, maybe not shopping by Amazon. I don't know if anyone we know wants to do that. It would be great not to have so much stuff go into the landfill. It would be great that the city wouldn't have to pay to put all that stuff in the landfill. And getting back to the food scrap collection, whether it's the whole of the city or just Old Town, I think the idea of food scrap collection is a good thing, but it should not be, the cost of it should not be first-laid household by household. It should be a social cost that the city covers on behalf of all its residents through the taxes that we pay. However, I would, if she's willing to do so, not taking up my time or her time, to talk more about what to me is a very exciting prospect, and that is that a private homeowning entity in town, a condo association, would like to consider shifting to the city pickup.
Okay, well, thank you. And I believe it was not a condo association. It was a single-family home development that approached you. Yes. Yeah, well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're sort of at the 10 o'clock mark, and this has been a fascinating work session. Actually, it's just been jam-packed. There's so many things we talked about: economic development, solid waste disposal fees, pay-as-you-throw, solid waste composting. Man, the list just goes on and on. But all kidding aside, really, really important topics that probably each one of the topics tonight deserved a full work session. But I'm appreciative of Ms. Brown for coming and sharing this information with council. Very appreciative of all the good work that Green Aces does with their advice and their suggestions. And, obviously we do need to make some adjustments in the solid waste disposal fees, just from an equity point of view. So that's it for the work session tonight. I do have an information item. Council members, any comments as we close out? Please go ahead. Go ahead.
I just want to thank Ms. Brown, Ms. Robles, and Mr. Lippert and the entire Green Team and the GHI board for coming tonight and engaging on this. It was very informative. And I just appreciate all the effort that went into preparing for this tonight. So thank everyone.
Definitely. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I think to summarize some of the follow-up items, I think I hope staff can maybe talk about with GHI, some of the concerns about separating out and seeing how feasible it is to separate out those payments and work out, because that's something that I think we need to know if that's going to be feasible or not. I think the other thing is the time scale and the difference in the fiscal years. That seems like an outstanding issue to be developed. And something else that we didn't actually talk about at all is we do have a business rate for trash pickup, and that, I think the households are the bulk of the trash, pun sort of intended. But I think that's also something that we still need to figure out, because we had a proposal for the increase in the business rates as part of the presentation about the solid waste increase, and we haven't really addressed that. So not saying we need to talk about those things more, just kind of putting those were the three sort of things that stuck in my mind as outstanding issues that we still need to work out some details on.
So once again, thank you to you all. Mr. Lippert, please go ahead.
When can I bring Green Aces and the Green Team members here to barricade you all in and make a vote on what you're going to decide on doing?
After we finish the budget.
Okay, thank you.
So, thank you, staff. Thank you all for your good work. I just had one quick information. Mr. Samarone, do you want to tie a ribbon on this?
I don't know that I could tie a ribbon on this. We're facing challenging times. We have the budget issue. There's a deficit there. I understand all the concerns from GHI. It doesn't align with their budget cycle. It's a significant increase. there's hindsight is always 20/20, right? If we would have been doing progressive rate increases over time, we wouldn't be facing this issue. One of the options we did propose, which is sort of a tongue-in-cheek kind of option of no increase that requires dipping into cash reserves. And I don't know if tongue-in-cheek is the right commentary. We at this point in time, we are going to have to dip into our cash reserves because even if council were to decide anytime in the next 2 weeks or so to increase the rates, we couldn't implement them until beginning August. So that's about a $10,000 per month dipping into reserves with a change, whether it's a 20% change. If it's no change, then obviously it's more. So it's not an easy choice that's before council. So I understand the challenge, and we want to assist in every way that we can to provide the information that council needs to make an informed decision, and we move forward with this.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. I do have one really quick information item to share. On May the 1st, there was a virtual briefing from Metro on the Better Bus Plan, and they've announced Sunday, June 29th is the day when they will fully implement the plan. There will be different numbering systems for the WMATA routes as well as the Prince George's County routes. So there's a communications toolkit which is available, which I'll forward a link to Ms. Andrews and to the city. There's a way that we can become a Better Bus partner, which would allow us to actually roll more information out to our residents. So this is a really big shift, and it's still not entirely clear to me the way that the county and the WMATA is going to be working together, but they are going to be using the same nomenclature, and they're saying that the routes are not going to change too much. We had the meeting and we decided not to implement the shift on Westway, but beyond that, I believe there's some other minor shifts. So there's also a few additional virtual information sessions. There's one coming up on May the 8th at 12 o'clock to 1. There's another on May 16th and May 29th, and I'll forward the email and the information to council, and we can distribute it to the community as well.